After the broadcasting of the first lesson yesterday, we received many feedback, wonderful comments. Thank you all. And from those comments, we have the suggestion to separate English and Chinese sections into different sections, which is a wonderful suggestion, and which is what we will do from now on. So the English and the Chinese will be separated. Thank you. Now I will continue to read my book. Part 1, The Chaos. I saw China in the form of an old hag, so decrepit and brain-sick that she would devour her children to sustain herself. Insatiable, she had eaten many tender lives before, was gobbling new flesh and blood now, and would surely swallow more, unable to suppress the horrible vision. All day I said to myself, China is an old bitch that eats her own puppies. Hajing, The Crazed, 2002. 1. In the fourth winter of the famine, I was returned to my family. It was the final week of January, a few days before the Lunar New Year. I was 3.5 years old. We lived in a large house in Tianjin. I slept beside my grandmother in a bedroom on the first floor. My mother, father, and 3 sisters slept in adjoining room. On the floors above us lived the families of 3 uncles and aunts. 9 adults and 12 children shared the house. On my last morning in the house, I was awakened before dawn by a gentle touch. Papa stood beside the bed, his finger to his lips to indicate that he did not want me to disturb Grandma. He carried me from the room and put me down on a stool in the corridor, and then he gathered some of my clothing and my only toy, a doll, and put them in a bag. He held me into my winter coat, tied my wool cap under my chin, and wrapped a scarf around my neck. Finally, he helped me pull on my mittens and winter shoes. He put on his coat, picked up the bag of clothing, and took my mittened hand in his. With hardly a sound, he unlatched the door, opened it just enough for us to pass through, and closed and locked it behind us. The morning was cold and quiet. The air was filled with snowflakes. The courtyard was buried beneath a blanket of new snow. When Papa noticed it was difficult for me to get a footing on the slippery cobblestones, he stooped and lifted me in his arms. As he straightened up, a light came on in the bedroom where I'd been sleeping with Grandma. There was a muffled cry, "Mama!" I twisted in Papa's arms and was about to shout, "I'm here, Grandma!" But Papa whispered, "Be quiet." He hurried through the gate and out onto Happiness Lane. The anxious voice continued to call, "Mama, Mama, where are you?" Papa rushed down the lane. 2 blocks from the house, he stopped to catch his breath. I wrapped my arms around his neck and laid my head on his shoulder. We waited on the corner until a bus stopped for us. We rode silently through the sleeping city to the train station. After buying our tickets, Papa carried me into a crowded concourse. I pulled his ear and asked, "Where are we going?" "I'm taking you home," he replied. "But we are home, Papa." He raised his finger to his lips. An abrupt restlessness in the crowd startled me. Several shrill blasts from a whistle were followed by commands to begin boarding. We were carried along as the bustling mass of people moved toward the platform. Papa held me tightly. When the crowd thinned, he ran along the line of waiting cars, watching in the windows for empty seats. After passing a dozen packed cars, he bolted up the stairs into a car and hurried toward a single empty seat. A woman struggling with 2 big bags in one arm and a child in the other approached from the far end of the aisle. She snagged her bags on the back of a seat and stopped to pull them loose. Papa dropped into the vacant seat a few steps ahead of her. She looked around anxiously. A crowd converged on her from either end of the car and made an exit impossible. After catching his breath, Papa rose and hoisted our bag onto an overhead shelf. Then he sat down and pulled me onto his knee. The woman next to us held a girl about my age. The girl's face was flushed and her nose was running. Her watery eyes remained fixed on me. An explosion of shouting and whistles sent people racing frantically back and forth across the platform. The cars shuddered and banged on their couplings. Those people standing in the aisles grabbed for overhead grips all the backs of seats as they tumbled against one another. Protests and cursing rose from one end of the car to the other. As we picked up speed, the grumbling of disgruntled passengers faded to a low, steady hum of conversation. The train made many stops. At each new station, people crowded the platform. Most were peasants making their way to the cities to sell goods on the black market. They clutched baskets or carried nets and crates of live animals. They pushed past those trying to leave the car, filling every vacant space while further compressing unfortunate passengers remaining in the aisles. At each stop, the air was infused anew with a stench of soot, tobacco, and animals. People shouted, scolded children, and complained while climbing over one another. To this was added the noise of chickens and piglets. I watched the confusion of commerce and discomfort from my perch on Papa's lap. Before long, hunger pangs reminded me that I hadn't eaten breakfast or lunch. "Papa," I said, "I'm hungry." He reached into his pocket and withdrew an old newspaper page tied with a string. Inside were 2 hard-boiled eggs. He handed me one and returned the other to his pocket. I pulled off my mittens and peeled the eggs, letting the shell fragments fall to the floor. A whine sounded beside me. The girl in her mother's arms was reaching out, begging for my egg. I paused before taking a bite. The girl screamed. Several people in the aisle, emaciated and hungry-looking, watched me. I cupped the egg in my hands. The girl's mother whispered in her ear, and she quieted. I decided not to eat, but rather to sleep. I awakened later and became aware of the quiet around me. I opened my cupped hands and found nothing. No egg. I searched on the floor and found bits of eggshell. I looked up at the little girl. She was asleep. On her chin, I noticed a tiny speck of egg yolk. I whispered to Papa that I was still hungry. He handed me the remaining egg. I quickly peeled and gulped it down. I asked Papa to get my doll from our bag. I told her all about our trip and how crowded the cars were and how hungry I had been. I promised I would give her an egg when we get home. "Do you like her?" Papa asked. "Yes." "She is a gift from your mama." "No, she's not. No," I said. Papa was about to add something, but stopped himself and turned to stare out the window. I remembered receiving the doll months earlier. A woman had come to our house, accompanied by a boy. She spoke with Grandma and Papa. Early one morning, she took me with her, and we traveled on the train to a place filled with very scary people. I cried and hid behind a bench and screamed that I wanted to go home. Before she left with the boy, the woman gave me the doll and told me it was a birthday present. The doll was little more than rags stitched together and stuffed with cotton. It was without a face or clothing. Papa, however, made her beautiful for me. He found a piece of plastic and cut it to fit the front of the head. He painted wide black eyes, rosy cheeks, and red lips on it. I watched him work as he brought her face to life. Grandma made a dress and slippers of matching material and presented the completed doll to me. I played with her so much that her painted face chipped and faded. I examined her and noticed cracks in her face and a tear in one corner where the stitching had come undone. I told her I'd make Papa give her a new face when we get home.
大家好，我是周航。巫一毛女士的这本书的英文版《Feather in the Storm》已经由蓝灯书屋出版，中文版《暴风雨中一羽毛》已经绝版。我们现在打算重印，我们做好准备以后会公布购买事宜，请大家跟我联系，发信到兆民邮箱，兆民的汉语拼音全拼，然后是阿拉伯数字1048576@gmail.com， 请大家跟我们联系。今天是文明客厅读书会巫一毛课堂的第2期，昨天是第1期，谢谢大家。